All right, welcome back to the Godfo Universe podcast. It's me, Dan, the writer and co-creator of the Godfo Universe. My other co-creator, Josh Adams, the artist and talented one. I'm just the muscle and looks. He can't make it. He's got family stuff he has to do. So it's gonna be me and Steven today. Um, we're gonna be doing a defense of the Star Wars prequels because they deserve it. I mean, have you seen Disney?
The prequels need no defense. Why are we even here, Dan?
Because the internet is dumb.
So dumb.
But man, let's just jump into it. Like when the prequels came out, there was a lot of hate for them, but it was a hate out of disappointment because it was 30 something years after the single greatest film franchise and American franchise ever had been released, which was the original trilogy.
Hmm.
The last one came out. Return of the Jedi came out what 83, 82 or 83.
I think it was, yeah, I think it was 83.
So when did the prequel come out? 99? Was it 99?
Yeah, 1999.
So yeah, I mean that's a big jump. It's almost 20 years or something. I mean, my math is way off. Um, and no one. I mean, if you were alive at the time, no one thought Star Wars was ever going to happen. Like there was ever going to be a new Star Wars. Like I grew up on Star Wars, and that was it. Like it was over. It's just this thing that existed, and it was the greatest film trilogy ever.
Still is.
Yeah. But do you remember that feeling as a kid, like when they were announcing, "Hey, Star Wars is coming back"? It was unbelievable.
Dude, I remember going to the grocery store and the Lay's potato chips had like all these new characters from Star Wars Episode 1 on them. And I had been anticipating it because I'd seen the original trilogy, can't even talk, trilogy like 100 times. And I remember seeing Darth Maul for the first time on one of those bags of potato chips, and I was like, I gotta have that bag. I want that bag of potato chips, and I was so interested in the movie because he just looks so cool. And just to think, we'd waited so long for Star Wars, and I can't imagine how long it must have been for my parents, but for me, I think I was like, see, 1999, I was 11.
So old enough to
Yeah,
appreciate it. It was definitely your age group.
it was a big deal. It was huge.
Yeah. See, I was like 12, maybe. We're roughly the same age, I think. Um, it's
I
weird.
think you were born in '87, right?
Yeah, most of my friends are either like older than me or way younger. So it's not. It's strange that I talk to a fellow late '80s person.
We're the best. We're the literal best.
And yeah, it was a phenomenon because it sucks, man. We're gonna get into this, of course, but people don't understand that like there was a time when Star Wars was like an American mythology. Like people knew great knowledge about it that wasn't even in the movies that they'd picked up from here and there. Um, like from a con where someone spoke and said something one time, or for an interview from a magazine, or from or of course from the books. But there was all this stuff that just kind of it was just there, it just kind of floated around. You know what I mean? That's so strange to think about now, pre-internet.
Right. Yeah.
And I mean, for me, of course, I was a dumb kid, but for a lot of people, it was the first time that they'd heard the term Darth used as a title. You didn't know anyone else was a Darth other than Vader.
Yeah, I've never really thought about that. I,
Yeah,
I do remember sort of thinking that, but it's so in our psyche now.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, Darth Vader being this, I don't know, one of the scariest characters on television in movies. I don't know what I'm talking about, dude.
yeah. He's probably the greatest. He's probably the greatest screen villain ever.
Yeah. Yeah, and to think there could be someone else that's part of this evil ring, this evil, you know, masterminded ring of villains. It was pretty cool to think that that could be expanded.
Yeah. So just going into it, it was a national and worldwide phenomenon. Star Wars is coming back. They dropped the trailer. It doesn't really give away too much, except that of course, Anakin Skywalker is in it, played by that kid, and uh, it kind of shocked the world. It felt new and exciting, which is something that hasn't happened in a long time. To me, it might be like the last great thing to feel like that. Like, wow, this is exciting and cool.
I remember having that feeling about episode 7, and it was similar, but it wasn't the same as episode 1. Because I remember, and I'm sure the older generation, my parents' generation, probably will tell you that 1977 was incredible, and I'm sure it was, but I wasn't there for that. But episode 1 in 99, I remember being in the movie theater and like I just had goosebumps at the opening credits, and people cheered. I mean, it was like a deafening roar.
Yeah, people screamed
Yeah,
when
it's
it started.
only Star Wars can do something like that. It was incredible.
Yeah, it it just it elicited like a concert reaction for people, and it was cross generational, and it's so strange. Like, I forgot who I told this, but my uncle, I saw him this year, who I didn't really know very well, and he's like the sternest, gruffest, toughest old guy ever. Like, he just built houses and built stuff for like 50 years. That's what he did. He still does it even though he's like super old. Like, that's just what he does. He works with like the hardest, roughest dudes. You know what I mean? Went to Africa,
Oh,
built a bunch of stuff, came back. He did that when like in his 50s. But that dude loved Star Wars, and I had no idea. He was like at my dad's house, and he's like, "Hey, I want to watch The Mandalorian." He's like, "That's a new Star Wars thing, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, it is." He goes, "Well, I want to watch it. I heard it was good."
because it is.
So it's crazy. Like, that might be the only thing that I've ever bonded with him over. But that's how Star Wars is for millions of people all over the world, or probably billions of people.
Yeah, I mean, goodness, my dad and I both, and now my son love Star Wars. And then my I won't say names on here, but my little sister and my sister-in-law are both really into Star Wars, but they're about 14 years apart from me, so they like Clone Wars.
Yeah.
They're huge into that stuff, and so Star Wars has kind of got something for every generation.
But what's funny is, and we're about to jump into that, the things people like or the things George Lucas was associated with. Like, those are the things that pass on from each generation to generation. It's not going to
I
be
think
7, 8, and 9.
I think maybe it's fun to make fun of George Lucas. I think there are like points in my time too where I've sort of caved to peer pressure and just like laughed at George Lucas about things. And there are some, to be honest, there's some laughable things. But the dude created Star Wars.
Yeah.
His whole story was in his head. He had thought out from beginning to end how he wanted that story to go. And or at least if he hadn't thought out how he wanted it to go, he was the guy that created it from the beginning, so he knows the essence of what it should be and what it can be.
Yeah. And he also had the wherewithal to know it was bigger than him. And it was not like when the books first came out with the EU, he kind of just let guys run with it and he approved like the stories or whatever. But he knew, that he created something huge. But all that to say,
Yeah.
George Lucas doesn't get enough credit. So let's jump into this, especially with the prequels. When you watch the prequels, they feel like George Lucas. Like, there's that magic quality to him of like this guy telling a big fantasy story, and even as some have argued, and rightfully so in some ways, that he didn't do it the best way. There's just something about it. Like, even when you watch them now, they look better than the new Star Wars movies. Um, they feel better. I can't.
Yeah.
He kind of bridged the gap, and he did this consistently between old cinema and new cinema. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's there's an innate quality to Star Wars where you just know it, you just feel it. and you know when things fit and when they don't.
Mm-hmm.
And whereas I think John Favreau and Dave Filoni kind of have sort of figured that out. For the most part, I think they figured that out. The prequels for sure had that quality to it. Whether you disagreed with his choice about how to use CGI or not,
Yeah.
whether you liked how the story went, there were still those. I know we've talked about it before. Those plot lines where there's long pieces of, this is the Republic and here are the politics and what's going on here. And a lot of people sort of hate on that stuff. But I'm like, was that not in the original trilogy? That's sort of what makes it Star Wars. And then the other thing, too, they knew how to use humor at the right points. Like the movie
Mm-hmm.
took itself seriously, but they were able to add humorous elements that made it whimsical and fun, which it's supposed to just be a fun space adventure. And if you sort of veer away from that too much, you've lost the essence of what Star Wars is. And so I felt like the prequels had that.
Yeah, I feel like, and another thing to praise them, they sound so good. I was rewatching Phantom Menace, and I could hear everything everyone was saying. And then even that intro scene where like the pilots get blown up after they drop off Qui Gon and Obi Wan, where like the Captain screams shields up and they get blown up.
Yeah,
Dude, like that sounds amazing. That explosion sounds so good.
yeah.
Like if you just watch the first 10 minutes of that, and then like when the the first time, excuse me, I'm getting over a cough. Um, the first time they activate their sabers, it's still like jarringly good. Like I can't explain. Whoever did sound design on the prequels, starting with Phantom Menace, just killed it. And we get told now because I try watching stuff on like sound designers and guys who do sound for movies, and they're always like, well, the reason you can't hear dialogue now is because we're trying to do dynamics. Like, well, dude, whoever did Phantom Menace knows dynamics and knows how to get dialogue to sound good. Just hire that guy for everything.
I love the cop out. Oh, we're just not going to do our job
Well,
well.
I mean, I gotta
So,
tell you, I forgot who said it, but it was more. He was talking more like a philosophy or political theory. But he's like, anytime someone says it's just, it means it's not just that. It's
I,
something else, but they're
yeah.
saying it's just this. Like, okay. Like, so
No,
I've kind of applied that to other things like that. I'm like, hey, that kind of works. Like,
it's cool too. You were talking about the sound. I remember that moment, that very first scene that ship lands,
yep.
and they're trying to do the negotiation with the Trade Federation, and just all of the sounds take you into the world of Star Wars, and it had to do that in that very first moment.
Hmm.
But you're making a really good point with the sounds. They have that sort of consistent, that consistent Star Wars feel to it.
That's what's so strange is like if you compare that scene to A New Hope, it starts the same way. Like it has that kind of like blaring silence, the tension to build, and then boom, the door explodes, and they're being boarded. Like
Yeah, it's like welcome to the story.
yeah, welcome to the story, pal. they, they really knew. I don't know. It's like modern movies. They can't ever let anything be quiet.
To that point, I don't want to veer too far from the topic. Carissa and I, we had never watched Guardians of the Galaxy until this week. I saw the very first Guardians of the Galaxy and loved it, by the way.
Yeah.
But one thing I noticed was that it was so action packed that I couldn't breathe.
Yep.
Like I felt like when it was over, I was like, "Oh, what just happened?" The past 2 hours just passed by, and I didn't know anything happened. It
Yep.
was so fast, and you do need that deep breath before things happen. And George Lucas, being the awesome filmmaker that he was, and having gone to school and studied it and practiced and
Yeah.
wrote great stories, understood that you needed to have those kind of elements.
Well, and most important, like you say, practice. He made like two films before Star Wars, and they were both good. And I think he made more than two. But all I can think is what THX 800, whatever it's called. I can never get the title right. And
Yeah,
American
like the
Graffiti.
experimental.
Yeah.
Right.
And of course, this goes without saying because it's been overanalyzed. Kind of like when you talk about the Beatles, overanalyzed. But of course, he had an awesome staff with him, of course. In every department, he had fantastic people doing what they were supposed to do and doing their job well. and part of it was getting out of their way. You know,
Have you ever seen Light and Magic on Disney Plus?
I don't
The
think so.
documentary?
No.
It was really interesting. It was showing the creation of Industrial Light and Magic. And, you talk about the team that was with him. His vision created that team,
Yeah.
like his vision, his foresight, his humility to realize he needed a good team around him to discover all this new technology to make a movie.
Yeah.
He built all of that. So you have to give George Lucas the credit that he's due. And plus, he doesn't care if you give him the credit he's due
Yeah.
because he has billions of
Well,
dollars.
that's
You
the
know?
thing. The only thing, because it's rightfully so, that I praise Steve Jobs on, and so many people praise that guy, but they don't praise George Lucas, and it's the same thing. He was a magnificent idea guy. He knew, and more importantly, he knew how to surround himself with technical guys who weren't idea guys. But if you gave them an idea, it sparked off like their creativity in that capacity to be technically masterful to create that idea. You know what I mean? Um,
Oh, yeah.
he was
I
the
mean, we
yeah.
often. Oh, go ahead.
No, like
Sorry.
the visionaries need artificers, and they have to have them. Like you couldn't have Steve Jobs as Steve Jobs without Steve Wozniak. Is what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah. Right on, man. I mean, and to your point, I mean, because he had such a vision, he created something that didn't even exist before. I think sometimes we forget
Yeah.
that everything that we do CGI with movies now, we have to thank George Lucas and Industrial Light and Magic for. He created all of these processes.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean,
What Lucasfilm has done even since then is insane. Like no one really gets the vastness of technology they've created and advanced. It's insane. This was before Disney bought them, you know.
yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, but it's crazy. At least from a technical level. Let's just start technical level because that's the easiest level to start with art. He did it again with the prequels. Like that alone deserves a ridiculous amount of praise. It's like if the Beatles had made Abbey Road twice, and Steven is like, well, they did. It's called Revolution, which I think
Oh
that
my
came
goodness.
after Abbey Road. I could be wrong. I'm pretty sure it did, didn't
Number 9? Number
it?
9?
Oh, that was the White Album though, wasn't it?
I think so.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was White Album Revolution, whatever the single was. I think it was like
Revolution
a
Nine.
like a single. Yeah.
Yeah, and nobody knows that hasn't seen this, but Steven is the biggest Beatles fan on the earth, which is why I keep bringing them up.
Well,
Which
they're the literal best.
we should do a deep dive into them and do it from a non over analyzing, non cult worship, non spirit of the time way. We should do it from like a musician way.
Yeah, man, just have fun with it. They did the
Yeah,
same thing. I mean, you're hitting on it. I don't want to get off on the Beatles because I'll talk
but
for a while.
because you do all the time.
Well, the Beatles are to the music industry what George Lucas is to the movie industry. I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
basically, you made a great analogy because the Beatles invented lots of new recording techniques. I mean, close miking and things
yeah,
that we take for granted now.
or at least had the ideas to want that, and someone made it happen.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. I would love to take stuff from John Lennon, but I can't. Like, he's my least favorite of the Beatles because his personality was so awful, so odious. But you can't take away what that guy did. Like, you can't take away. I forget who said it. It was like that George Harrison. Somebody said George Harrison was the greatest songwriter or one of the greatest songwriters on earth, but he was in a band with the two greatest on earth.
Yeah. Or he learned from the best. I mean,
Yeah,
Paul McCartney. Sorry, I don't want to get off on. We're gonna get way off.
yeah. But what I had this, I was listening to oh gosh, This Too Shall Pass, which is it was by George Harrison, which in my opinion is the greatest single Beatles record. Whenever they broke off, and did like their solo records or whatever, I think that's the best one I think ever made.
Oh,
That's
you think all things must pass?
yeah, that's the one with What Is Life and My Sweet Lord on it. Like
My sweet love.
what a fantastic record. But
Yeah, for real.
yeah, so technically, and going back to this, tie it all together with music and all that. You can let a scene sit whenever you've got John Williams at the helm of the score.
You know, he had to know that.
Yeah.
But I don't think that I don't know. I don't know if you've seen those memes before where like
Oh yeah.
you know somebody's on a piano and it's on fire and
On
it's
a
like John
beach, yeah.
Williams.
And
Yeah.
it's like, all right, so a guy with a double lightsaber is fighting two Jedi's. Like John Williams is like, say no more. Just he's playing
I
the
mean,
piano on fire.
I don't want to like hurt anyone's feelings or anything, but this is simply my opinion.
Yeah,
I think that the Duel of the Fates is the best Star Wars music that exists. Period.
I think so too. I think, but see, again, how do you come back after almost 20 years and then drop the fattest track ever after you've already redefined movie scores for an entire generation? Like that's another thing to praise the prequels about. You see what I'm saying? Like, how do you do that twice? You create the single most recognizable music score ever, and then you come back and you're like, hold my piano, you know?
It's like George Lucas had to know what to expect because it was John Williams. I mean, you
Yeah,
knew what to expect, but no one knew that he just got better with age or something. I
yeah.
don't know what
It was like,
happened.
how you make Bad Out of Hell and then Bad Out of Hell 2?
But it's like Zeppelin 4, all the Zeppelin albums were great and then
Yeah.
Zeppelin 4 happened and you're like, "What?"
I am so sorry to whatever people are listening that I keep coughing. I'm trying to turn away from the mic. I'll like be minus a lung by the time this is over.
Oh, and you need an aqua lung.
Ugh, please no. Wasn't that by Jethro Tull?
That's what I was just thinking.
Yeah. What's funny is I hate Jethro Tull, but my wife loves them. I'm like,
I can only handle so much flute
yeah, let's say
in
if
rock
you
music.
want like a 20-minute flute solo, go ahead. I like my rock to rock.
If I want to listen to flute, I'll listen to Snarky Puppy.
Or hold on, let's play Ocarina of Time again. But all right, yeah. So technical level, and they only get better. Like by the time you get to Revenge of the Sith, I mean that movie just looks so good. Um,
And it's
yeah.
oh, go ahead.
No, there's parts of like Attack of the Clones. There the CG is a little iffy, but it was also revolutionary at the time. Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
they were trying something new. I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that episode 1 was filmed on actual film.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah,
And then 2 and 3 was like a digital process or like digital recording, but I'm not 100% sure about that.
I'm pretty sure you're correct. And if you know, I mean, there were little things like, of course, they changed Yoda from being a puppet in episode 1 to being CGI in the later ones. But
Yeah, I didn't like that.
I didn't either, and but it's still not as bad. Like even George Lucas at his worst. This is the thesis. George Lucas at his worst is better than most directors at their best, and it was better than Disney Star Wars at their best. But
I don't know what happened. I mean, George Lucas and Steven Spielberg and I mean those that vein of directors and writers. I mean, they knew how to write a good movie.
yeah,
They knew how to write a movie where you would go to the movie theater and you would chow down on some popcorn and then you'd be sick to your stomach and you want to watch it again.
yeah,
Like they knew how to write a movie. You'd go home and tell your friends and be like, "Oh, I got to go to the movie theater to see this movie again." Or sneak in again, or if you knew somebody that worked at the movie theater, you'd go see it again. They knew how to write a movie like that. And like these days, I don't know if things are just changing so much, but I don't know if they write that way anymore. But George Lucas had that sensibility about him. He knew he could see how things were gonna go on the big screen, and he always wrote, in his mind, thinking that way.
yeah. And I think you just hit the nail on the head. He started with a story, and that's what I loved about um like Star Wars, the prequels, and all. He just kind of assumed you would catch on. Like there's some stuff that's explained, but he didn't explain everything. Even with a movie with an opening crawl explaining the movie, he still didn't like force it down your throat as much as like movies today do.
I don't know, mic drop moment for him, but he probably thought maybe they'll just watch it again
Yeah,
and they'll get it the next time or something. It's like he doesn't insult his audience if that makes any sense.
yeah, and I don't know, but going back to to keep us back on track. moving on from technical, because most people discuss themes because that's easy to discuss, you know, especially for Star Wars. And the themes have been over discussed, but there's some things in the prequels that just go that still to this day go overlooked, and a lot of it has to do with Anakin. And you know, a lot of so what I see a lot of people discussing, which again, mark of a great trilogy, is that people are still discussing it to this day and discussing it in good faith. They're not arguing over. It's like not the new ones where there's still people are still trying to defend the Last Jedi, and that's the thing. Like if you're still having to defend a movie after years that probably wasn't good, but he created these characters, particularly in Anakin, that he kind of did. I'm thinking maybe he took from Dune, but then again, he'd written that way back in the day. And I know I'm floundering here, but Dune is about a failed messiah, and that's the whole thing. At least the first two or three books are, because it's a messiah that didn't want to be one.
Hmm.
And Anakin is kind of he's this really interesting character because he is this chosen one, but he's like a dark chosen one, or at least a human chosen one. Does that make sense? And
Yeah, he
yeah,
he's definitely very, very human. Um, very seduced by power. Easily taken in by power. Easily taken in by for Anakin, his downfall was his love for Padme, and I guess it was anyway. So he's easily seduced by those things. So yeah, he seems like a real
yeah,
person. I don't know if you want to go theological on this
dude, go
from
for
a
it.
Christian
Why not?
perspective or not.
Like
Well,
there's a lot of lacking of that on like the podcast Star Wars space. So just do it.
well, I actually thought about it today because I'm a pastor and we did a music worship service this morning, and so I'm the guy that leads the songs, and one of the songs that came on was talking about the second Adam.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, no, yeah, was it the second Adam or the first Adam?
Do
Anyway,
you want to do
but
a quick tiny rundown of that explanation for people who aren't Christianity
so
inclined?
Adam, we think about Adam and Eve in the garden, so many people know about that. Adam, his name in Hebrew actually means man, and while he's a real person, he also stands for mankind. And so the point is that Adam failed in his mission to obey God, live according to his standards, and so he has to be banished from the Garden of Eden. He sinned against God. So he's a man that failed, and he's an archetype for the rest of mankind because every single person after him is going to have the same sin nature and going to fail. And so what happens when Jesus comes, he's considered the second Adam, and the second Adam is the perfect man who never failed, who succeeded to please God at all times, and is perfectly righteous, perfectly pure, perfectly holy, never made a single mistake. And so the point was, we needed God to literally come inside of man in order to accomplish God's will because mankind was unable to do it apart from God. So the true Messiah would be God and man together in one person.
All right, cool. Sorry to interrupt, but you know, some people don't know Christianese.
Yeah, no, great. Thanks for doing that. We have to think about that at our church as well. A lot of people don't know the churchy words, so it's good to explain stuff.
All right, so you were thinking of the second Adam in regards to Anakin, Luke.
Oh yeah, in the sense of like Anakin, he's like the first Adam. You know, he's considered this person that's supposed to like walk line, and they're looking to him to be the hero, but he ends up letting everyone down and see, I don't know if Anakin this would be something interesting to think about. I don't know if Anakin really grabbed hold of that chosen one thing or not. If he like really thought about it deeply, was like, man, I'm the chosen one. This is a lot of responsibility. Or, you know, I'm the chosen one. Who cares? I'm gonna do whatever I want to do. I
Mm-hmm.
don't I don't know which Anakin was real in his thought life.
Well, I think that I think you just described Anakin perfectly, which is a man ruled by his emotions. He's a and that's the whole thing. He's a man. He's a person. I've been thinking about this too, and he's a kid who was told he's the chosen one, and that alone would make most people villains. But it wasn't that did it. And that's why I think George Lucas was so brilliant with this. And like I said, maybe he did read Frank Herbert's Dune. Like I know they came out relatively close together, and I know he took something. Like he took Tatooine from Dune, like the desert planet, and may have taken more. But like I said, I don't know what he thought before he written it. So whatever. I'm not going to accuse him of which everybody. If you're going to write sci-fi, take from Dune. I do it. Everybody does it.
because it's amazing.
Yeah, but he took this idea of and when you see it in the movie so well, that's what I think. I think Hayden Christensen did a good job because he's just a frustrated guy. He's taken. I hate to say it, he's not. He's brilliant. He's a brilliant tactician, and he's brilliant. But he's not necessarily the smartest kid when you meet him. He's like technically minded. Like he can build things, but he may not have even been literate at the time. You know what I mean? And he doesn't show the same kind of, I hate to say emotional intelligence, but the same kind of awareness of other people that Obi-Wan has. He
Mm.
I
Well,
mean yeah,
I think he represents well, you know, what it's like to not have a dad.
yeah, and be a
I mean,
slave.
yeah, I mean, he grew up. He's very emotionally unstable, and I think it's because he never had that stability of a father in his life at an early age. His mom was there for him, which is awesome, and that is part of his downfall. Actually, later on, his just his
Yeah.
love for Padme, his love for his mom, and you know, I think that from the very beginning, he found his. I could be wrong about this, but it seemed like he found his identity in being able to fix things, being able
Mm-hmm.
to create, being able to be a, like you were saying, a technically minded person. People can rely on me for something.
Well, what's
That's who I am.
and to keep praising the prequels, we see even his anger very young in his lack of confidence. Whenever and it's a great line. Whenever Padme's talking when she first meets him, and she says, "You're a slave," and he goes, "I'm a person, and my name's Anakin." And he's actually mad at her, and she apologizes, but you can see that touchy subject right there.
Yeah,
Um,
he's got a chip on his shoulder.
when he's why shouldn't he? He's owned by a giant flying space mosquito. Um, but yeah, he fixes things, and you see that that's how, and his ability and his power is how he gets out, is how he frees himself through Qui Gon, and
Hmm.
it's his it's his innate abilities that get him free, and it's his innate abilities that get him into the Jedi Council when everything else is against him. Even the Jedi Council were like, this kid's unstable. He has great fear, and in great fear with great power, of course, leads to great suffering. But all that to say, a lot of the debate that hinges is like, well, the Jedi Order made Anakin a villain. They said he can't express himself. They can't do this, and this. And it's like, no, those are excuses. And so much of it, and let's say go with the themes. So much of what made the prequels, I think, so great is you see the creation of Anakin into Darth Vader, and it's not how most people would have written it. He is tragic, but it's all his doing. And Obi-Wan even says that, you've done that yourself. And a lot of people give the Jedi Order and they give Obi-Wan even some flack for being like, you expect this guy to like live as like a chaste monk and all this kind of stuff, and you don't let him do this, you don't let him do that. And it's like, well, so many other people did it and they weren't evil. That's the whole thing. That's the brilliance of Lucas too, is this Cain and Abel kind of comparison of Obi-Wan and Anakin. Obi-Wan sticks to the Jedi Order. He sticks to the rules, and it serves him well.
Yeah, and you can't. It's like you can't expect the Jedi Order to change their standards because
For
you're a
you.
whiny little kid and you never grew up.
And they said they didn't
So
want you.
yeah.
Like they said this is not going to work on him. Like this is not who this is for.
Do you think that Qui Gon made a mistake in identifying him as the chosen one?
I don't think he did. I think like I said, I'm so ignorant on the new Star Wars lore, and that's fine. I'm not going to spend 400 hours
Nobody,
reading it. But
nobody cares about that anyway.
well, you know what I mean. Like I just I'm saying even before the Disney ones, I'm not caught up on it, but I don't care. I think the idea of the chosen one, and this may have come down to just power.
Hmm.
instead of bringing balance to the Force. And I think that's the problem is Anakin just had power and didn't know how to control it. And he didn't even let it, like I said, this is how George Lucas kind of did differently. He didn't even really let it define him. He just, like I said, he didn't think I'm the chosen one. I'm going to do this or I'm going to do this. It wasn't really arrogance. It was just it was lack of emotional control. So much so that the great cosmic karma is that most of his body becomes mechanical, and
Yeah.
even then, it doesn't stop him. It's that same lack of emotional control that makes him kill the emperor.
You
He,
know, it's
yeah,
crazy because he always seems indifferent to his power. You know,
yeah,
like the amount of power that he has. He's not like the traditional villain that's like,
mm-hmm.
I have all the power in the universe. I'm gonna make
Which
everyone
is which
miserable.
is Palpatine.
Right? Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Exactly. He's always someone's puppet.
mm-hmm,
You know, from the very beginning, like you know, even in the original trilogy, he's the Emperor's puppet,
mm-hmm.
and you see that
He's
progression, and
always a
you know where
slave
he makes him. Yeah, he was a slave as a kid, and now he's a slave, and maybe that's all he knew. Maybe that was like somehow comforting to him
in a
that
strange,
he'd have
perverse way.
somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It's very well written though.
Well,
You can't
and
argue with that.
yeah, when Padme's older than him and she's a queen, and he didn't like being told what to do by her. You can see that in Attack of the Clones. Um, when she kind of gives him some orders he doesn't like, he kind of sucks it up and goes along with it. But she's still a pseudo mother figure in some way because, like I said, she's royalty and she's older than him. He's kind of, despite wanting to become like a man role and protect her, he's also still kind of sliding into that subservient role,
Right.
or he's trying to conquer it through her. If we had to do
Mm.
some armchair philosophy here, but
Yeah.
whatever. But you see that keep happening is that he's always a secondary. He's always a slave, and some of that insecurity is always still there, especially with Obi-Wan. And he knows Obi-Wan didn't want to train him, and that never goes away. Even as close as they become, that still never goes away, even by the end.
Yeah. You know, I kind of wonder if Anakin even had a quest for power. And I guess
I don't think he
you
did
probably,
because he had to be given it, by Palpatine.
I mean, you probably don't need to be on a quest for power when you have the most midichlorians of any Force user ever, you know,
Yeah,
more than Yoda even. And so it's like you almost don't. You've already achieved the thing that people are looking for. They're trying to get to. It's like, well, cool, but he doesn't seem. I've always thought it was interesting. He doesn't seem really phased by that power.
yeah, and
He just
that's
is
what makes him
somehow wielded by it.
that's what made him a really good character. Which of course Lucas already defined that in the first trilogy, and I think masterfully expanded on it in the prequels. Another point to the prequels, since that's what we're talking about, is he just showed him as a human being. And so many people that analyze these movies and analyze that character, they watch the Clone Wars, they try to make him this non-human figure. Either he's 100% a victim, or he's so in control and so that's how they view him. You see what I'm saying? When it seems to me like he had the power to do what he wanted for the most part, because he was kind of a reluctant Jedi in the sense that he didn't really want to be hunting Dooku and Grievous all that much. He kind of just wanted Padme, and
Yeah,
the problem was, of course, all his power couldn't save her.
yeah. It's really tragic. Really well written too. You know,
Yeah,
I love that theme. I think when I was younger, I didn't understand it quite as much. But now the older I am, the more I really understand the gravity of what drew him to be sort of the twisted mechanical figure that he is.
yeah. He it's strange. Like he seems almost like he could have been content. That's what strained me. Like I said, he lacked all emotional control, but he didn't seem really that hard to tame and to please. He just kind of wanted, I hate to say love, but he did. He kind of wanted protection and safety and love, like all the things that kind of Qui Gon had kind of promised him too as a father figure.
Yeah, and you know, you see played out too that the Jedi are afraid of the attachments that people have because of this very thing. You know, you got emotionally attached to someone, Padme, his mom, and that attachment is what was his downfall,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately. Which, right or wrong, that's how the Jedi do things.
Yeah.
And I could understand from his point of view why that would be a cause for concern or a cause for him to want to leave the Jedi Order and maybe even, pour that into Ahsoka as well. So that all makes sense to me, and I think it's very well thought out, very well written. So you can't come at Lucas and say that's not a good story because Darth Vader is a very complex character. Anakin is a very complex character and one that you're kind of rooting for through episode 1 and 2.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed that I was rooting for him even though I know he's going to become Darth Vader. I'm like rooting for him to be a awesome Jedi.
Yeah.
And in some ways he actually ends up becoming a great Jedi. In some ways you see him doing, struggling against his worst nature, but also being a great guardian of peace and justice in the galaxy.
Yeah. Well, and that's what's so great. Again, with the prequels is it was set up, and what made the prequels great is that the original were so great. Lucas made you care about a character you knew was going to be a villain,
Hmm.
and he did it from the first trilogy. And he didn't try to necessarily make a he didn't do what Disney's doing, which is, oh, let's make an overtly emotional and sympathetic origin to all of our villains. What he
Right.
told was just a story, and he told presented with all the bells and whistles, and no cleaning up of. He didn't make him a villain, or I'm sorry, he didn't make him a victim. He showed over and over and over these are the mistakes he made, and these are the choices that brought him to where he is, and he
Well,
could
it's
have stopped at
funny.
any time.
There's all sorts of villains in the Star Wars world, the Emperor being one of them, and you don't have the same emotions that you have for the Emperor that you do with Darth Vader or Anakin,
Mm-hmm.
because the Emperor comes off to you as one who really is just greedy for power,
Yeah, that's
and
all he wants.
Anakin comes off to you as a tragic character.
Mm-hmm.
He's someone who, like you're saying, is very human. That the worst side of him is the one that has won out, and now he's a victim of the consequences of his choices.
Well, go and with that, and then someone is that I think it was Dave Filoni actually when talking about Duel of the Fates, he talked about how a lot of people miss that the Duel of the Fates is called that because it's the fate of Anakin that they're dueling over, and
Mind blown.
yeah, and how Qui Gon is this father figure that probably could have at least steered him slightly away from what he would become, and will the Force or whatever have you, Maul wins out, um, and he's left with Obi Wan. But you see Qui Gon in that fight; he's the antithesis in that whole movie. He's the antithesis of Anakin. When he's fighting, he pauses. He's in control. He's always in control of his emotions, even when he's frustrated by everything. And he has those great lines like, "I will do what I must, Obi Wan." Like he's tired of he's kind of tired of Obi Wan's like being like a wet mop all the time. And he's
Do you think? Do you think that's why Qui Gon liked Anakin so much? Is because, he saw a little bit of himself in Anakin. Like I was thinking that if everything had gone to plan, that Anakin would become someone like Qui Gon,
I don't know
in
if
the
he's
sense that, like, okay, because there's speculation. I don't know if this is true or not,
yeah.
EU or whatever, but there's speculation that Qui Gon used both sides of the Force, and you also see too, his desire sometimes to go against the will of the Jedi Council if he deemed it best
Mm-hmm.
or wise in that moment. And he's sort of a rebel, but he's nice about it. And he's polite. He's a gentleman about it, I guess, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, which
But
is great. A great counterpart to Dooku. I really like how they did that with Dooku.
oh yeah, oh man, man, I forgot about Dooku.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I just wonder too, like if Anakin would have become more like Qui Gon, if everything had gone to sort of Qui Gon's plan, and if in the duel of the fates that the good side had won out.
I think I think there was something like that because you get that you don't really get the emotional angst in Qui Gon, but you do see a man that can control his emotions.
Hmm.
And I think that of course that's what Anakin needed. I think that's why Qui Gon took it on himself to train him, other than just thinking he's the chosen one. You see his patience with him. He even answers Anakin whenever he gets done fighting Darth Maul on Tatooine, and he's winded, and he really got overwhelmed by Maul when he barely escapes as they're leaving Tatooine.
Yeah.
And as he's catching his breath and giving all his Anakin's asking him questions, and he takes the time to answer Anakin's question, you see that he was a great dad potentially.
Dude, you just kind of blew my mind. I was drawing this connection in my mind. You were talking about someone that had control over their emotions.
Yeah,
I could be wrong, but I think there's that scene in episode 3 where the Emperor is using all that machine and stuff, and he's turning Anakin into like this machine guy,
yeah,
and turning him into in the Darth Vader that we know. And he goes, that scene that everybody makes fun of, no
yeah.
or whatever. But he's like so overcome with emotion in that moment
Mm-hmm.
that everything's like breaking and
Yeah, the
smashing and stuff.
machinery can't hold him.
I think I remember the Emperor being slightly afraid in that scene.
Yeah, for a
Like
second you can see it.
just for a second, he's like, I can't control this guy.
Yeah, never. I'll
Like
never be
he's
able to.
he doesn't realize how powerful he is, and if he ever finds out, that's a problem for me.
Yeah, and I know. I guess my advanced expanded lore of Star Wars is limited, but I know it's like canon or whatever that the Emperor specifically built the suit to try to like cause him more pain and to like make him weaker
Hmm.
consistently to try to keep him under control. Because
Wow.
the only person who kind of got who understood Anakin, at least he understood the negative parts of him, was Palpatine. He understood that this kid is uncontrollable emotion. So I've got to direct that emotion. And
Yeah, so on the one hand, you've got Qui-Gon who could have helped him with his emotions, and
yeah,
then on the other hand, you've got the Emperor where he ended up that had zero control over it and
yeah.
just
The
wanted to manage it.
I think the worst part of Obi-Wan and the Council's philosophy was telling him to deny those emotions instead of channeling them.
Wow.
Um, and I think there's parts of the Force where they do that and they try to, but I think I think Qui Gon would have probably been the best to do that. Yeah.
Mm.
Which another point to the prequels, another point to George Lucas. The man can create a character that's only in a movie for one movie, or he's only in a movie for 10 seconds and make you love him. I mean, because
Yeah.
the fake new fans are always ripping Boba Fett. They're always like, he was only in one shot of a movie for like 30 seconds. Like, yeah, look how cool he was. Like,
Still is,
he
man.
took on Luke Skywalker and almost won. Like,
Yeah. That's a big deal.
that is, he's the strongest Jedi to ever exist, and like Boba Fett pinned him down, had the tactics and the strategy to strike when he wasn't paying attention, and he almost defeated Luke Skywalker. He didn't, but even though the battle on Jabba's carrier, it's kind of campy and silly, and it's perfectly played, of course. But I mean, it showed the competence of Boba Fett. It showed he was a
Man,
threat.
we
Um,
need to have that. We need to have that discussion sometime.
we should, but that's the thing is the fact that people are still. You love Qui Gon Jinn. You didn't even need the Rebels and the Clone War stuff, which were cool, but just from the Phantom Menace, such a noteworthy character.
There's always a bigger fish.
Well, and Count Dooku, which is he's the antithesis of Qui Gon. Like, here's Qui Gon. Qui Gon doesn't quite agree with the Jedi Order, but so Qui Gon goes into like older Jedi texts. He leans more into the Jedi lore of the Chosen One. He's studying midi chlorians, this theory he has, and Dooku doesn't agree with the Order, but he goes towards the Sith,
Right.
and one trained the other one. And I don't think Qui Gon lived to see Dooku become a Sith Lord. I think that happened afterward, canonically. But he did see his master leave. He did see
Right.
his dissatisfaction with it. And again, to his credit, Qui Gon was so dedicated and so controlled with his emotions that he didn't let that phase him. So I don't know. It would have been probably boring, but an interesting idea to see Qui Gon train Anakin. I don't think Anakin would have ever been a perfect Jedi in control of his emotions, but I think he could have been. He probably wouldn't have been a Darth Vader.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think they're definitely drawing a contrast between. I'd never seen it before, but there is definitely a contrast between the Emperor and Qui Gon there as to who's going to train the boy.
yeah, and I, I know he's the arguably one of the greatest Jedi as far as maybe not in power, but in philosophy ever, and that's Obi Wan Kenobi. But Obi Wan Kenobi did fail Anakin. When he says, "I failed you, Anakin," he's right, and I still at that moment don't think he knew how he could have not failed Anakin. Does that make sense?
Yeah, how do you think he failed him?
I think,
I agree with you.
yeah,
I just wonder what your take is on it.
I think he didn't have the patience of Qui Gon. I think his personality was just too different, and some of that, of course, was thrust upon Obi Wan. But he's the one that took that from Qui Gon, and that may have been a downfall of Obi Wan as well. I think he let his emotions and dedication to the Order override how he should have taken care of Anakin.
It's kind of like the dad that says to his kid, why can't you just
Exactly.
be,
Yeah. You never see Qui Gon do that. If you really watch Attack of the Clones versus Phantom Menace and just watch how they interact with Anakin, it's vastly different.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think, which again points to the prequels. Since we're still on themes and characters, which is fine. He showed a side of Obi Wan we'd never seen before, which I think is a flawed side.
Hmm.
And I mean that's fine. Some people are everybody, and you saw it with Yoda too. Yoda was a little flawed in that. I mean, some people go off the deep end talking about, oh, it was Sidious was right, the Jedi were blind. It's like, look, when you stab someone's eyes out, that doesn't mean they're blind. It means you're a jerk.
Right.
So Sidious wasn't right. Sidious caused the problems that the Jedi were facing. Were they perfect? No, but I don't know. I got so tired of that argument. I got so tired of hearing that Sidious was just bringing order and all this. I was like, yeah, great. Every tyrant says they're just bringing order, especially after they caused all the chaos.
Yeah, well, that's a sign of the times.
Yeah,
Our culture's influencing Star Wars even now, which is crazy.
yeah. But anyway, um, character wise, going with it, I don't know. I think people who don't write stories don't know how hard that is, especially after 20 years to come back to a story and flesh out these characters even more, even though they've already been fleshed out, and to do it without breaking them, or subverting them. And Lucas did that. That's incredible. That's very hard
Yeah,
to
it is.
do.
It is, and they're characters that you care about.
Mm-hmm.
You get invested in their life, and you're just like, man, I want to see this happen. I want to see that happen. I want to see this character do this and that. We're still talking about it 20 years later. It's he did such a wonderful job. And I think a lot of people don't, like you're saying, they don't realize what it takes to create a good story. They're kind of like entertain me, entertain me, entertain me at all cost. They don't want to think. They just want flashy stuff on the screen. And it's like without a story, it could be the most amazing CGI movie possible, but it's still not a good movie without a good story.
Yeah. What? And with that, um, of course, Ewan McGregor, his on-screen charisma is off the charts. Like he's ridiculous with making
Where
you
do they
like his
find
character.
him?
England, where all the good actors come from.
Yeah. I
But
think he's Scottish.
eh, they're all the same there now.
He was a wee bairn.
Just don't tell the Scottish I said that. The English will say yeah. Like, yeah, we own that, right? Or we did. Um, yeah, his name's Ewan. Ewan. So yeah, he's definitely of the Celt, of the Clan
Yeah.
MacLeod. But I'll tell you,
McGregor.
he'd have been great in a new Highlander. Maybe not now. He's a little old, but anyway.
Yeah.
Ewan McGregor killed it, but of course the writing team of Lucas and his writers they somehow made an entire new generation love Obi-Wan, and he's not the wise old sage anymore. He's a young guy, and they made you love him even more. That's crazy.
Yeah, it
That's
really
really
is.
hard to do, you know.
Yeah. He was a bit of a rebel as
A
well.
bit of a
You
rebel.
know. Yeah, Obi-Wan didn't follow all the rules either. And so I think it's just funny. We try to draw all these comparisons. The Jedi are this and the Jedi are that. I'm
Hmm.
like, yeah, well, they have an ideal,
Yeah.
but as with any person, living up to that ideal is impossible.
Well,
You do the best you can.
well, and to go into that, because people always talk about the failure of the Jedi. It's like, look, the Jedi were I know they were bogged down in bureaucracy and all this kind of stuff, but it's because their society, their world had put them there, and were at consistently wanting their help and consistently integrating them into their politics and stuff. The other opposite, the thing would have been like, oh, should they just stay out of it? And should because if they stay out of it, then people will be like, why aren't you helping? And if they act unilaterally, then the political force is coming against them. So, I mean, man, Zack Snyder's Man of Steel or Batman v Superman did this great with basically what do you do with people like that who have great power, and do they have a responsibility to intervene in political affairs?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I don't know how I'd answer it,
I don't either, but
but
I mean, but the movie also shows like that's I guess I get so mad. I'm still stuck on this topic, but the prequels did such a good job of it. That's how I'm tying it all together. People are like, well, the Jedi shouldn't have been this involved with this. But it's like, well, look what one Sith was able to do. Look what one guy with their power and ill intent was able to do. And
it's kind of interesting because you mentioned this just a second ago. I think it's the book of James that talks about if a person knows the right thing to do and decides not to do it, it's for him it's a sin.
yeah,
If you want to have a biblical foundation for that, there it is. But the Jedi being the ones they didn't ask for their special power.
mm-hmm.
They were given it or something. I don't know how that works in the Star Wars universe, but they somehow had it.
Well, not only did they
And
have it, but they dedicated their entire lives to keeping it in check by keeping their bodies in check and their emotions in check. I mean, how crazy noble is that?
it really is. I mean, it really is. It's not just cool guys with lightsabers that can do cool tricks, and that's all there is to it. I mean, they they saw that they had like you're saying, they had a responsibility. They had tasks to perform, and who gets to decide how that works? Which negotiation you go to, so this planetary system doesn't fall into anarchy. I don't know how you decide that. I guess that's why they designed the Jedi Council, but you know, it's I never actually thought about it from that perspective before that they felt like they had a responsibility to use their power for good.
Well, if you want to tie it, it's kind of like the elves in Lord of the Rings. And I don't remember if that's in the books. I don't think it is, but in the movies where Galadriel reaches out to Elrond and she's talking about the world of men, and she's like, "Do we leave them to fight alone?" You
Hmm.
know, like you can correct me. I don't think that's in the books, or I don't think
I
that.
don't think it
Yeah,
is either.
but it clearly
Um,
had. Like, I think that there's a conversation like that because Elrond does send his reinforcements.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that that's a great example. You have to we're all called on at times in our life to do things that might be uncomfortable because it's the right thing to do. And so it's always great to have characters like that. The Jedi seem to me like that. There's a lot of uncomfortable situations they had to go into to keep the peace and justice.
Yeah, and
And
I think people trivialize their role. It's like, look, if you have this power that if your emotions get slightly off, you can destroy entire groups of people or planetary systems. We're going to build an entire religion dedicated to keeping those things in check.
and so that's why you can't fault the Jedi Council too much with Anakin.
Yeah, when they said
Because
we're not training him.
yeah, I mean they literally refused to do it. I wonder if they thought there was a danger of him being trained anyway. Or I also, the other thing I also wonder is why they allowed Obi-Wan to train him, because they did give him their blessing sort of
Yeah,
reluctantly. but they did, because of Qui Gon.
Yeah, I
It
think
just
out of
makes you
respect for
wonder.
I think out of respect for Qui Gon, I think out of fear that the Sith were returning because they knew that had happened, and maybe out of the defiance of Obi Wan, because I mean Yoda says like Qui Gon's defiance I sense in you. It's like a joke because Obi Wan's like I'm gonna train him anyway.
Well, I mean, maybe Qui Gon was the real genius of the movies.
Yeah,
Maybe he's the one that really understood that he was going to bring balance to the Force in some way. And that's a topic for maybe another day. Is
yeah,
talking about what it actually means to bring balance to the Force. Because I still am honestly I'm not sure I have a full grasp of what that really means or what Lucas intended for that to mean.
yeah,
But
yeah.
that really
Let's
plays
table
into
that.
Anakin.
That's a great topic. Let's table that from the discussion. Um, on that on this topic though, uh, before Disney, particularly before the Last Jedi and before Ray, there seemed to be this idea in Star Wars that the dark side and the light, the Force was living, and it was more than living. It had a will, of course, because they
Hmm.
talk about it, and it's dangerous. And that the dark side wasn't just people doing bad things. It's that it's this living consciousness that can possess you and take you over. And that's what the original trilogy really showed. It beat in your head in Return of the Jedi. Like if you basically strike me down. Like when the Emperor wants him, he's like, "And your journey to the dark side will be complete." Like he knows this force, literally, the force will consume him. And that,
This might be slightly where I think Star Wars probably dips into New Age. It's probably more closely related to New Age than it is to Christianity in the sense that
oh yeah,
you've got a all powerful force that has a consciousness. You talked about a will. It has a will. We could argue whether or not the force is a person. That's maybe we don't need to really argue that at all. But
yeah,
it has a will, and it seems like it can accomplish that will through good and evil means. And I
mm-hmm,
think that's where we might that might differ from the Christian faith.
yeah,
But it seems like in some way the force is going to decide how things play out. It'll do that through good and evil means, through hosts, people that wield it. And it's interesting because in some ways people are allowed to wield the force and make the force do things, bend it to their will. And then other situations it seems like the force itself bends the person to its will. So I am still honestly a little bit confused as to how it works because
yeah.
most of the time it seems like people use it as a tool.
I think it. If I could be wrong. I said I'm sure people have explained it better, but to me it seems like a thing that just is, and that's how Yoda explained it. The tree, the rock, it flows through. It just is. But because it is, it, it's more. If that makes sense. Like once you start down like the dark side of it, you can't come. It's super hard to come back from it because it's so powerful.
I
Because
kind of wonder, like, if we think about it, if we're thinking about it the right way, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because
I
this is
don't
just
know.
me seeking
Yeah,
understanding, because I don't know. I don't know if I'm thinking about it the right way because uh, if we're gonna place moral value to something,
yeah,
my knee jerk is to say that dark side of the force, bad,
mm-hmm,
light side of the force, good. But someone like Qui Gon using both sides of the force for good kind of throws that out.
well, I
And so
think
I wonder what's
yeah.
really intended.
Well, I think they explain that. I could be wrong because Mace Windu supposedly did a lot of that. But I think the way they explained it was that it was more of like a redirection than a full channeling of the dark side. Because the understanding I have, like I said, that I think is that one can't really control the dark side; it controls you, and
Hmm,
that's what makes it the dark side. Is that it?
interesting.
Yeah, and like I said, maybe I'm wrong with the lore, but I don't know how you get a different idea of than that when you watch Return of the Jedi. That's the entire climax of the movie is that
Right.
if you strike me down in your anger and rage, you're not coming back from that. Like
Wow.
some, you see what I'm saying? Like that, and Palpatine knew that
Mm.
it's so powerful and so corrupting, you don't come back from it.
Mm.
But that's lost, and I'm gonna jump off, go off on a soapbox if that's fine if you get the time.
Yeah, man.
That is why the Last Jedi failed. That is why the entire new sequel failed. Other than everything else bad about everything, but when you watch the Last Jedi and you get two people, you get Rey and Kylo Ren, just these absolute mudfish of characters, because it's the oh the dark side tried to seduce Rey and she wasn't phased by it, and Kylo's called by the light side, and they're just flopping on the beach. Nothing happened. There's no consequence. Like, and Rey's like, if you watch her fight in the throne room, she's screaming and she's yelling at Rey. There's no consequences. There's never
Mm.
consequences in any of those movies in regards to the Force. And then he's like, at the end, it shows like the kid using the broom. It's like, well, what is the Force now? Now is it just subject to the will of man? Is it this humanist, like stupid subjectivist view? Or is it an all powerful thing that flows through everyone and you can be consumed by it because it has its own will?
That one.
Well, that's what we were told for like 30 years. But what we were shown, particularly in The Last Jedi, is that it's just this trick. It's this parlor trick.
I think that's why I was saying what I said because
Yeah.
it did make things very confusing, and I think that's the consequence that Disney's always going to have to live with not using someone like Filoni or someone who really understood what Lucas meant or
Yeah.
intended. You
I
can't
yeah, sorry.
you can't veer too far from it because you've lost it. People watch those movies and they don't know why they feel like it's not Star Wars, and I think you just hit the nail on the head.
I
That's one of the main
well, I
reasons.
do think that's what made Anakin different. And I
Mm.
think I could be wrong. I think that's what Lucas was going with is the redemption of Vader through his son. It goes back the same thing that took him to evil delivered him, which is his emotions.
Mm.
And I think that's what made him the chosen one. That made him a fulcrum or whatever. No, that's from Dune. What do they call him? A virgins. Same thing.
Right.
A virgins and a fulcrum. Where the two meet. There you go. The
Where they
cross.
come
Where the
together.
yeah. the cross marks the spot right there. Let's go ahead and just say what it is, right?
Yeah.
Um, it's that he's this figure that simply, and guess you could call him the awakened individual or the individualized man or the Ubermensch, the will to power, could do
Mm.
that, and he did it, and that's what made him so significant. And I
Mm.
think that's what Lucas was probably originally going for. Is you see every character that falls to the dark side is lost, falls is lost, falls and lost, or when they're a Jedi, they're good, you know. But you see Vader being the one that can pull back from the current. And it's
Mm.
like, well, then that raises questions like, as well as that the Force enacting its will upon him, or is he the individual, the Jungian individualized man that can reshape the world with his will?
Right.
Who knows? That's what the chosen one is. I mean, it's this Messiah figure, the one that can calm the waves. You know,
Right.
does that make sense? And
Yeah, it
yeah,
does.
and then to take that,
Unfortunately,
yeah,
everything went tragically wrong.
yeah, and then to take that. I know in the EU there's some stuff with Luke. I think Luke goes to the dark side and comes back, and there's like that kind of thing. But even Lucas said that Vader kind of changed things, and that Luke surpasses Vader. So
Mm.
there is the idea of a new type of Jedi with Luke, but then again, Disney didn't use that idea. So that's not an excuse that you can use for The Last Jedi, you know?
Yeah, Disney wasn't thinking with their they were thinking with their pockets,
Well, that failed too.
unfortunately. Well, yeah, they realized that. They
Yeah,
realized that people aren't going to consume it. They're not going to watch the movies. They're not going to stream it. I mean, I stopped. This is the last thing we'll say about it because we got to get back to the prequels.
yeah.
But I stopped buying Star Wars movies with The Last Jedi.
Yeah, I didn't buy that one.
I don't even own The Rise of
Rise,
Skywalker.
terrible movie.
I I mean, I think that Episode 7 was good as a one-off because it was just fun fan stuff. But other than that, I think that trilogy was. I'm gonna try to forget it. It's like the
Yeah,
Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
the new one that's coming out, The Dial of Destiny.
I hope that's good.
Man,
I'm very nervous about it.
dude, all the spoilers are saying that old Phoebe Waller, what's her name, replaces him in time and becomes like becomes Indiana Jones, and it's just them making fun of how old and stupid he is the whole time.
Oh boy.
Yeah. The original plot that leaked said that she uses the dial to go back in time and she becomes Indiana Jones. She literally replaces him in the timeline. I don't know if that's going to happen. I don't know if that's going to
Uh,
happen, but they did admit that it's got time travel in it. Hey, guess who the bad guys
oh,
are?
who?
Nazis.
You mean it's not Sala this time?
It's like the 60s or 70s, and like, how are the Nazis still bad guys? Why don't you do the commies? Like they, they were still murdering like millions of people at that point. The Nazis were gone for like 20 or 30 years.
Because it's easy to make fun of them and dislike them.
Yeah, and I mean they should be made fun of and disliked, but come on, guys! Like, there's other bad guys in history. Like guys, the commies were killing people up until like 95. Like,
So let me ask this question, Dan. What are some of the with the prequels?
yeah,
What are some of the biggest objections that people have that you've heard?
when it
They're like,
first
"Hey,
came
I
out,
don't like the prequels because of this."
when it first came out, it was you know, that the kid that played him was annoying, which I get it. Like when I rewatch it, I'm like, I get some of that. Like he has a very loud voice. Um, some of his dialogue isn't great. I don't think any of that's actually the kid's fault. I think he did a pretty good job overall for what he was given. You know,
What 10-year-old kid's not a know-it-all?
yeah, especially one that is literally a know-it-all when it comes to some things. You know,
Yeah,
but if you watch it again, he's super humble to Qui Gon.
that
he
is very interesting.
he doesn't talk to him the way he talks to Watto. Um, he
Maybe
respects
it's
him.
because he treats him as a person.
Yeah, he respects him. Um, Jar Jar Binks, I really do think you probably could have done that whole movie without Jar Jar Binks. He's not as bad as people make him out, but he is completely unneeded. Uh, the political stuff, I don't get. I think that's pretty good. I think that makes sense in the world, and even as a kid, it didn't bore me. You know. Uh,
Suppose that
yeah,
suppose that Jar Jar Binks just did not exist at all.
yeah,
Like when you look back at it now, would you be sad if Jar Jar was actually gone? And I would answer that by saying, yes, I would be sad because it's my childhood.
yeah. That's a great way to admit that, though. Yes, I would because it's my childhood. Um, I think they could have done the entire plot without him and without the Gungans. Like as far as like a storyteller, I don't think you needed it. Um, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't needed.
Yeah, I mean the dialogue wasn't great. It was just it was easy to make fun of the Gungans. It
Yeah,
just was.
they're but
And
they're,
so
but
I
then
don't
again, they're not that bad in the grand. They're not as great as Star Wars should be, but they're not that bad compared to like most of movies. Like
Yeah,
there's
I,
some
I agree
director
with
trying
that.
his best and being worse than that. And his name is Ryan Johnson.
Ryan Johnson. I knew you were gonna say that.
He's so bad. Not in the Michael Jackson sense of bad, or in the not in the Power Glove from the Wizard sense of bad. He's just bad.
He
Um,
just likes conflicted characters.
that that, that man doesn't. That man's never met a human. I'm convinced after watching his movies and watching his dialogue and his characters that he's never actually met a human before. He thought Rose Tico was a person.
Oh my goodness.
Here's me being petty. Why'd you have the hot Asian sister die in the bombing? Why didn't you let Rose die?
I'm not gonna comment on that.
You let the attractive sister be the main one. Sorry, that's me being petty, and I hope that made somebody laugh. But it's true. All that guy cares about, I'm not going to go off on a rant, but all he cares about is getting his great shots that look nice because he's really good at that. There's your compliment for Ryan Johnson. He's really good at cinematography.
Maybe he should be a cinematographer.
Yeah, that's what he should be. That's what he should be. His movies
Yeah.
always look great. Not as good as Wes Anderson, but anyway. Attack of the Clones is the worst Lucas film.
I agree.
That one is an Obi-Wan solo film that goes on entirely too long. Even as a kid in the theater, when the C-3PO head being put on the robot assembly line scene happened, I was done with it even as like a 13, 14-year-old kid. I was like, oh, this isn't good.
I think that maybe Lucas wrote the prequels for a different age group
Maybe.
or something like that. I don't know if he was just thinking more in childish terms then. Because, you could see something like A New Hope. That to me seems like a teenage level.
Yeah.
Like you could see that being like a teenager level, and then Empire Strikes Back is like young adult. You're kind of coming into yourself. And the same thing with same thing with that. When by the time you get to episode 3, the themes are so adult that it's like I was hesitant to let my son watch it
Yeah.
because it was just a little darker.
Yeah. It
And we did
starts
watch
dark. Yeah,
it.
it starts with Dooku's death and beheading.
Yeah, it just had it was very very I actually did fast my son is 7 and he was 6 when he saw it. So I fast forwarded some things and told him what happened, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like but I could let him watch episode 1 without doing anything at all. So I just wonder if he was writing to a different age level.
Nobody feels anything when Aunt Beru gets burned. Even Luke didn't cry.
Oh gosh, I never thought about that.
I saw that as a meme. It was
That's the
like
worst.
it showed Ray and Poe, and it was like their reaction to a guy dying they just met, and they got like the tears streaming down, and it's just Luke, and it's like when your aunt and uncle get burned alive. It's just
There's just burning skeletons on the ground.
and it's just him staring at him.
Oh god.
uh, but
Oh,
yeah, I get the critique of Attack of the Clones. Like I said, I still think they're better than anything Disney's done movie wise, but they're definitely the weakest. That one has a lot of talking, a lot of Obi-Wan talking to people, and it's
I
kind of like a noir, but not really.
it's really long. I think that movie
Yeah,
is one of the longer Star Wars movies.
it at least feels it. It feels very long, which as a kid, Empire felt long to me, but then it's cause it was a broodier movie and a better movie. But as a kid, you don't really realize that. It doesn't have Ewoks.
Well, here's my number one defense for episode 2 is Mace Windu fighting in general. Like Mace
Yeah,
Windu is so cool.
man, that is Betsy's favorite scene in like a movie ever is when he just goes, "This party's over." Whenever I watch it, she goes, "Oh, I always forget Sam Jackson's in this movie."
How could you forget?
Because it's my wife.
Oh man. Yeah,
Dooku, great part of that movie. I think they should have actually done more with Obi-Wan and Dooku. I think they should have introduced Dooku at the beginning as like an emissary or an old friend that's helping them, but then slowly do his twist
yeah.
at the end. I think
I
that'd have been
mean,
cool.
Yoda coming in and saving the day and cleaning up,
Yeah.
Obi-Wan and Anakin's mess is pretty awesome too.
Much to learn, you still
You still
have.
have.
Yeah.
It's the best because Dooku realizes he's not going to win the fight, so he just kind of cowardly throws something on him and
Yep.
then takes
Runs
off in his
away.
ship. Like, really, dude?
Yeah. I can't. You can't take Master Yoda.
Master Yoda.
The dialogue between Anakin and Padme is objectively bad. They're romping through the meadows. It's really bad. I do think that criticism is justified where it's like hey Anakin, it's like a meme, and it's like, hey, teenage boy that has never really seen a woman and lived on a desert planet and has no control of his emotions. Why don't you sit this one out and just go watch the senator? And they show Padme. It's like, why don't you go babysit this unbelievably attractive like politician for a couple of days unsupervised?
Like you're gonna be the one to like be in charge here.
Yeah, let's leave him alone with like the super attractive politician for a couple of days and see what happens.
Oh my goodness. Oh man.
Yeah, and then of course Revenge of the Sith is. I still think Phantom Menace is the best prequel movie. I just love it. I think it's
Me too.
so great. It's simple and it gets to the point. It's got Maul. It's got the pod race. Fantastic. But Revenge of the Sith, I think, gets the most praise, and I get it. It's really good. It's really good.
You know, I hate to backtrack, and I won't spend too long on it, but I forgot to talk about the pod racing.
Mm-hmm.
That is probably one of the better defenses of episode one. But if you're like me, and maybe you're not, you played episode one pod racer on Nintendo 64
Oh yeah.
like every single day. So it was a big deal. The pod racing thing was a big deal for me, and it was a brand new idea that no one had seen in Star Wars
Well,
before,
and
and it
what
worked really
what
well.
modern movie do you get away with a race scene like that, dude?
Yeah,
Like the the chutzpah on George Lucas to like be like, I'm gonna do Ben Hur but in space, you know, and then did it, and
I
it was
forgot.
amazing.
Yeah,
I'm,
you're right. It does have Ben Hur vibes.
well,
It's like you're in that chariot race, you know?
and he killed it. Like I said, he did such a great job of bridging like the old and the new. He did it like two or three times. He's like, I'm gonna put Kurosawa in space, and then like
Yeah,
it's amazing. Then I'm gonna put Ben Hur in space, and then he did it. He was like the pre-racist Kanye West of directors.
yeah. Well, it's kind of like a cartoon. It's kind of like a cartoon too because you have like these outlandish characters that are in
Yeah,
this race and they're doing the most ridiculous things and making ridiculous noises
and they're
and
dangerous.
oh yeah, oh my goodness. How dangerous is that to let like a 10-year-old kid go 750
Yeah,
miles per hour across the desert?
against the Bulba's big throbbing engine. Boom, 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 boom.
Dude,
Again,
that
the
scene
sound
still gets
effects.
me.
See, everyone knows this. If I say that sounds like Sebulba's pod racer,
Yep.
everybody knows what that means.
I know exactly what you're talking about. I literally
Everybody,
and it's getting closer
the
and
sound,
closer.
the sound design and the music on that, you can't top it, man. It's probably got the best sound design of any Star Wars film ever.
And we didn't even talk about the lightsaber scene between Maul and
Oh yeah,
Qui-Gon.
as far
Oh
as
my goodness.
it's the best. It's the best lightsaber scene to ever exist. I think, except for Luke versus Vader, just because of how important that fight is.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would argue, and I agree with you on that. I would say that my personal favorite is this particular lightsaber scene.
Yeah,
It's my personal favorite. It does all the things. I mean, they're using the
it's my favorite
Force.
to watch. Yeah, it's my favorite. I think objectively, everything together, Luke versus Vader is the best. But this is my favorite one to watch.
Dude, and then when that big choir comes in, you first see him,
Yep.
and he lets off his robe and like he does the double lightsaber. Oh my goodness.
And
That
then
is an iconic scene,
as
man.
soon as it cuts away, dun, 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 you're like, oh crap, man. This
I
is
challenge you to find, people that don't like the prequels. I'm like, are you saying you don't like this scene? Because if you don't like that scene, I don't really think you're a Star Wars fan.
there's
That's
there's
you can
not
you can quote me on that.
there's not a line of dialogue in that whole fight.
We let our Jedi we let our lightsabers do the
Yeah.
talking.
Well, what are you supposed to say to them all? He's like this unstoppable force of chaos and evil. You know.
Yeah. He's very controlled, very
Yeah.
wise, like
That's what's
very
crazy.
smart about it.
He's like an animal. He's like a
Yeah.
panther or something. Like when he's watching Qui Gon, like, I don't know that you see you see Qui Gon's reservation, you see Maul's like anticipation, then you see the fury and like the in between with Obi-Wan where he doesn't have it drawn like Maul like waiting, but he's got it like he's ready to go. You see what I'm saying? You see the conflict between Obi-Wan.
Right.
That's probably the most defining scene in Obi-Wan's history is that hallway scene between Qui-Gon and Maul.
Oh yeah, I mean it
Yeah.
it makes him who he is. I mean, he's lost his master.
Yeah.
He's lost his friend in that moment, and he has to watch it happen. And fortunately, he's the one to sort of best best him. But still, I mean, it's a really tragic scene, and he could respond with hatred towards the Sith, which I'm
Which is
sure in
what he
some
did,
ways,
which is what
yeah,
cost him that fight initially.
right,
Yeah, because Maul beat Obi-Wan, and then Maul's hubris made him lose.
yeah. Yep, that's
Yeah.
exactly right. And then Obi-Wan remembered his training when he's hanging over the chasm. And he's like, "Wow, what better poetic way to end Maul? Well, he didn't really end, but you know what I mean, end that battle by using Qui-Gon's lightsaber to
Mm-hmm.
defeat him."
Yeah, he had
Oh,
to use his master's training to beat him.
really, really good, really well written.
And we've talked about this on here before, I think, but I can't get over how, and I've overlooked it for a long time too, and I think most people have, that the reason the high ground thing was so, people like beamed it, made a joke about it, but the reason it's important is Obi-Wan knew that Anakin was about to do the same move that he used to beat Maul, and he's
Wow,
letting him know that's not going to work. Like that's not going to work on me. And I know where you learned that,
right,
and I didn't notice that parallel for years, man, for a long time, probably like 20 years.
yeah,
And then you see it, and you're like, Obi-Wan was like, I'm going to do what Maul should have done.
dude. It's again, Star Wars is not insulting its audience.
Yeah,
There's a it causes you to think and fill in the gaps. He didn't explain why he said that. You just had to figure it out through his character and through the story,
I think
which
he
I
said.
love
Don't, I
that.
think he said, "Don't try it."
Yeah, he did say that. That's right, he did.
Yeah,
Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, don't try it.
I'm
Yeah,
pretty sure he said that.
that scene still gives me goosebumps
Yeah,
because in episode 3 where Anakin and Obi-Wan face each other is what Dan and I are talking about now, but that scene is so cool because the way that they do the lightsaber battle, you see that they're basically equals.
Oh,
Like they
somebody point not to interrupt, but somebody pointed this out. If you watch the blocks though, like when they block each other, most of the time Obi-Wan is using two hands and Anakin's only using one.
Oh, wow.
So it's kind of this subtle thing of Anakin's power or hubris or both.
Like maybe Anakin's grown to the height of his power now, and if Obi-Wan doesn't do something now, he won't ever be able to stop him.
Yeah, or Anakin's displaying that like arrogantly. I don't
Oh
know. It's a
yeah.
real.
Check.
It took a duelist. I didn't realize it. It took a guy that like studies swords. I saw it on YouTube to point that out. I was like,
Well,
that's
that
really
is
cool.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were talking about Anakin earlier. Not really living for power per se,
Mm-hmm.
but I think by the time this point happens in the story, he's a little more on that track, I guess.
Well, he does tell him you underestimate my power, but
Right.
I think what Obi Wan didn't underestimate was his lack of control. And I think that's the big thing. Of course, that's Anakin's whole thing. Is like, it doesn't matter how much power he has. He still can't. He won't control it. He won't control his emotions.
Right.
He prevents himself from becoming like as powerful as he should be.
Do you think that it was important for Obi-Wan to have killed Anakin, even though he didn't end up doing that? But was it important to the fate of the universe, I guess, that he do that?
That he kill him.
Yeah,
Um,
the fate of the galaxy, not the
I think
universe, the
I
galaxy.
think had he killed him, I don't know if he would have forgiven himself. I don't know if he would have actually been part of the further crusade to stop Palpatine. It may have been what made him leave. You know.
Hmm.
because I think what he did alone was enough to make him do that.
Mm.
Um, I think Yoda would have killed him.
Yeah, it's like if you can't handle this, I'll come in and do it. Kind of like with Dooku.
Yeah, I think Yoda would have ended him right there. And Yoda probably would have been right. But again, I don't know, George. Like I said, maybe it's been explained. I don't know, but to me, as a fan, I think George Lucas kind of left it open ended to will of the Force. Is the whole thing is that Anakin go through that, become Vader to kill Palpatine. You know,
Yeah,
um,
it could be.
or to
I mean,
or
that
to
is
have
what he
Luke.
did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Luke do it. I think there's so much about all of that that's fascinating, and it's why we still talk about it. Is it's the little holes like that. Again, unlike a lot of modern movies where they try to explain every single thing to you. My gosh, I forgot what movie it was, but they even had to do a close up scene of when these people are talking and they're holding hands, and they had to do a close up of when someone says something in it. They do a close up of the hands coming apart, and it's like, guys, actors can learn basic body language. You don't have to show you know what I mean? You don't have to zoom in to be like, oh, look, they're no longer touching.
Right. There's no mystery boxes anywhere.
Yeah, if you're J.J. Abrams, you'd never answer the dang mystery box.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good concept.
Yeah,
I think it's very important to a good story that you don't explain everything. But yeah, I never really thought about that. The better stories that I've heard don't explain every detail. They give you enough to where you're satisfied.
yeah, they give you the
But
story.
yeah, it's like I don't know if you saw Castaway
Oh
with
yeah,
Tom
I
Hanks.
loved Castaway.
I still debate in my head like what does the end of that movie mean?
Mm-hmm.
What did he do with his life? You know,
Did he stay with
and
her? Did he not?
yeah, and I love that. I
Yeah,
love that. You don't really need to know that to enjoy the movie.
yeah, and it
But
literally
it's
ends
just
with him at a crossroads.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's it's great, man.
yeah,
So yeah, he did that really well with the prequels. I felt like story wise it was epic, and I think the things that people maybe disagree on are CGI or Jar Jar or things like that.
there's not anything bad enough in them to make them unwatchable or un-Star Wars. Like here's how I explain it to people, and I'm so glad we're here. We already set the precedent. Okay, you got the Beatles, right?
Yes, you
Pretend you
do.
have the
You
entire
have them.
Beatles catalog,
I
and
do.
then yeah, and pretend John Lennon never died, neither did Harrison. So pretend it's like 1990, and the Beatles release a few records, and they're not as good as Abbey Road. Okay,
Who cares?
maybe they're like their first two records. Remember those?
Yeah.
Maybe they're kind of like that, and maybe they let John go a little bit off with Revolution 9 stuff, and so they have like him and Yoko playing an accordion and some spoons on like two tracks. Maybe you see what I'm saying? Maybe you get a little bit of that.
Yeah.
That is still better than someone making the monkeys and then saying, "Oh, they're the Beatles now." and
I
if
think
and
the
if you don't
comparison
like them, you're not a fan of the Beatles.
I think the comparison that you're drawing is that the monkeys are Ryan Johnson's
Yeah,
episode 8.
yeah. They're Disney Star Wars. Yeah, it's like, hey, we're gonna say this is them now, and if you don't like them, that then you're not a Beatles fan. Like,
Let's
okay,
try to let's try to take this thing that people love and somehow mass produce it and water it down to absolutely nothing.
yeah, get rid of all the
And
guys that made it.
gosh, it's unforgivable, man. It's unforgivable. I can forgive the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. You know that for I know I keep coming back to that, but you messed with like the best movie series. I don't know, man. You just messed with
Yeah,
something that's near and dear to people's hearts. You can't you just can't do that and expect people not to be upset.
probably
And
the greatest fiction America's ever produced.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I say that to any fans of Steinbeck or whoever, which I think he was Irish or something. I don't know.
I love that you said that because that excludes Tolkien, and I agree. Now that makes me agree with you.
Oh yeah, it's like saying
So
like Aerosmith is like the best American rock band or something, or CCR is the best American rock band. It's like, yeah,
it's
American.
yeah, they are American and they're a great rock band, but they are not the best.
Yeah. Are they Zeppelin? Are they Sabbath? Are they
Yeah,
we all know the greatest unfortunately came from Canada.
just to troll everyone,
The
it
Holy
came from Canada.
Trinity.
The Holy Trinity. But yeah, man, like I think the prequels hold up. You know, I remember watching um I guess the most recent time I saw the prequels back to back was before episode 7 came out. I
Yeah.
was doing a movie marathon to sort of get ready for it, and I remembered just again how much I loved those movies, especially when you watch them back to back.
Yeah.
And to think you and I, you know, our age group, we waited for them to come out. So it was a couple years in between, and you had all this anticipation. And when it came out, it really none of the movies, in my opinion, disappointed.
No. No. You can still look at them and say that's Star Wars. Like that.
Exactly.
That's enough. The bar is set so high, you can say that's enough. That's
I
my
think
opinion of them.
Disney's finding their place now. You can do a lot more with these TV
Not in
shows.
Florida, they're not.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, that's funny.
Sorry.
I'm Governor DeSantis. Nothing's really gonna happen here in Florida unless I say so. Anyway, I like DeSantis, by the way, just so everybody knows.
That's the most controversial thing you said.
Oh goodness.
Anyway,
I'm not gonna get political. I shouldn't have
yeah,
said
let's do
that.
that
You can
later.
cut that out if you'd like.
I don't care.
um. Oh goodness, what were we talking about?
The
Goodness, I
prequels.
forgot what we were talking
The
about.
prequels.
The same thing we've been talking about for an hour and
Yeah.
a half. I
Um.
don't care if you disagree. You're absolutely objectively wrong if you think the prequels aren't great.
Yeah, I will still watch Phantom Menace as many times and as much as I'll watch the original trilogy.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head earlier. 80% of the reason that anyone probably likes the Phantom Menace is the music.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even
It's
without a good
fantastic.
story, you've got amazing music. I mean, it's just like just from the very beginning, you're at a great starting point.
Yeah, but
Have you ever seen the? This is a huge distraction. Have you ever seen the behind the scenes where they actually record the Duel of the Fates?
yeah,
Where they have the
with like
huge
a
choir in the
choir and
recording
all
room?
that. Yeah,
Oh my
I used to love
goodness.
watching that stuff as a kid, where it's like the behind the scenes of like the Disney movies, where you see like the orchestra and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that used to be cool back when Disney music was cool in movies. When you did yeah, I don't know, man. When you get John Williams, it's hard to. Well, that's the thing is that the music in the sequels is good, and I hate to say it, it's not as good. Um,
No, it's definitely not as good as episode 1.
yeah,
It's good, but yeah, I think he's just drawing on themes that he created before, and you're kind of revamping themes. He had some new themes, I believe, for different characters and
I
things,
can't
but
remember 'em. from
yeah,
from the day I first heard the Star Wars thing. I heard it from the first day I watched the first Star Wars movie. I remembered every theme from every scene of that movie. And then when I saw Phantom Menace, I remember Duel of the Fates forever.
that
Yeah.
well, this is there's so many discussions we could have. I've been trying to write songs and thinking about melody is one thing that I think is really interesting. Like John Williams was a master melody writer,
Mm-hmm.
or was a master. He is a master melody writer, and I think that's probably one of the hardest things to do as a musician is come up with memorable melodies that are unique.
Yeah.
And he did it, very very well.
He was just dropping them from bombs, man. He was like, "Oh, you need one? Here you go. Here you go. Here you go."
Dude, to be a fly on the wall when he created that, like, oh man,
He's
that'd have
like,
been great.
"I don't know, George. I need something to spark my memory. Or I need something to spark my imagination. All right, God with horns, double bladed lightsaber. Oh, you got it."
Hold my piano.
Imagine like sitting there, like not having a muse, and then George Lucas with like his no neck comes in and he's like, he's got horns and a double bladed lightsaber. Oh, okay. I'm not trying to make fun of George Lucas. I love George Lucas. I love that he's just like he just looks like the average fat dad that hasn't aged in like 30 years. He's been old and fat since he's like 40. He's looked the
I've been
same.
laughing.
He looks the same since like 1999.
Been laughing for like 30 seconds now.
He's still got like a flannel button up shirt and like blue jeans and white shoes. He still dresses like Jerry Seinfeld from Seinfeld. And the man's worth like $10 billion. What you should do is like search photos of him. I'm trying to wrap it up. I gotta go to church. I'm trying to wrap, but like there's photos of him just like eating at like his favorite place in like this strip mall. It's just, that is just George Lucas eating like a plate of like Chinese takeout.
Such a normal dude. He's so unassuming. You know, and it's funny too because I think all of the actors on A New Hope were like, "This is the dumbest movie," and like,
Yep.
"Who is this director? Like, this is never gonna succeed." Like that, they just didn't know he was like this like crazy evil genius that is like the nicest guy next door.
Yeah, who's about to be a billionaire.
Yeah, it's like we're about to ride this train for 40 years.
Yeah, I think uh Sir who played Obi-Wan? Ian not Ian
Oh,
McCall.
Ewan McGregor.
No, who played
Oh
the
no, Alec.
Alec Guinness.
That's
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
I got an interview before it came out. He was like, "Yeah, it's some space thing."
I'm sure that's what everybody thought. They had this like, crazy Wookiee guy and
Yeah.
you know,
I think most
because
of the
all they could see was the characters
yeah,
in the set. They couldn't see the CGI.
I think most of the I think even most a lot of the budget went to just pay Alec Guinness from that first one. I could be wrong, but it's like they had to like pay him to be in it. And there's that really famous interview now where Mark Hamill is like on some late show and he's like, so we get out the trash compactor and we're running down the hall and we take a break and I'm like, shouldn't like our hair like shouldn't my hair look different? Shouldn't our clothes be like, like we were just in a trash compactor? He's like, and Harrison Ford looks over and goes, "Hey kid, it's not that kind of movie." apparently, Harrison,
Troll.
apparently Harrison Ford gave George Lucas hell all the time. Like every time, like George Lucas would want him to do something, he's like, "I'm not doing that, George." And he's like,
He's
"What do you
such a
mean?" He's like,
grouch.
"What do you mean you're not doing?" He's like, "Well, feel free to make Star Wars 2 and 3 without Han Solo." He's like,
Didn't he try to like? Didn't he try to get killed off
"Yeah,
several times? Like
I'm
he just wanted like kill my character off. It'll make him meaningful.
I'm so sorry I'm coughing, you guys." But yeah, he's like a Mark Hamill was always like just doing what George Lucas said. And he's like, hey kid, he can't do it without Luke. just tell him you'll walk. He's like, what's he gonna do? He's gonna make the last one without you. It's not gonna happen.
No, it's just amazing that we're even talking about this. I mean,
Yep.
this is a testimony to an incredible writer. You know,
Yep.
George Lucas. He doesn't just get credit in every movie as the creator, which he does. I see that.
Yep.
But he arguably created the foundation. I mean, not arguably. He created the foundation that every one of the new stories is
Yep.
written off of.
Brilliant.
And to be
Brilliant guy.
honest, the best part of any of the new stories, whether it's Andor, whether it's Rogue One, whether it's Mandalorian, the best part of it is the stuff that Lucas created,
Yeah. It's
and they
all
just built
his
on that and
his
expounded
vision.
on it.
Everything that comes from
Yeah,
his vision is good. Um.
yeah,
Yeah, and visionary in a lot of senses. He somehow got the credits to play at the end of the movie, which was kind of unheard of. Because he didn't want to interrupt everything. It was brilliant. He knew to hold out for merchandising and licensing rights. That's how he
Mm.
made his money, was from toy sales and stuff. Um,
Wow.
yeah, he still to this day I think does not get enough credit. I think he's still underrated as a director and as a person.
I
Cause
really think that people that make fun of the prequels are just joining the bandwagon. And so I would encourage any listener that, is hating on the prequels to really think long and hard about it, because, there's only so much you can make fun of someone, and, be lying and not be truthful. I think they're absolutely incredible. I'll defend them. I'll continue to defend them. Actually, they probably don't need our defense, and no one's
yeah,
going to listen anyway. But this is. Oh, I should have said that.
that's funny.
No one listens to anything I say anyway.
That's okay.
But
No one listens to this podcast, so there you go.
oh my gosh, I can't believe I said that. You can cut that part out too.
No, it's hilarious. It's staying in.
Oh my goodness,
But
that's not what I mean by it.
nah, I got you. But yeah, feel free to make fun of the sequels, everybody.
Yeah, if there's any that can be made fun of, it's definitely 8 and 9 for sure.
Yep.
You
But
can make fun of that.
I gotta run. I'm sorry I've coughed in everybody's ears for far too long, and I gotta take the family to church. But if you haven't, like and subscribe, and the Apollyon 20XX graphic novel is coming out very soon. Josh actually quit his full time job to work on it, which is insane. He had that job for 17 years. He wanted to leave anyway, but still, that's an incredible leap of faith in what we're doing and just in general. So
Man, that's awesome.
yeah, and we'll have Stephen back on. Stephen's working on a record with me that will be coming out very soon, actually, and it ties into the universe as well, and is quoted in some of the Lamentations. If you haven't, well, you should put out some stuff. What should have so I can promote you. But anyway, Stephen is a remarkable musician, especially a guitar player. And once he puts out some stuff, I'll pimp him.
That's not gonna happen anytime soon.
Well, anyway, thanks for coming on, man, and we'll talk to you guys later.